with this culture, transforming the demographics of the urban settings, as well as transforming black culture and much of American culture in different ways, as well as the politics of America as well. The start of the Great Migration will begin. The start of the Great Migration began with the post years of the Civil War after Reconstruction. I would imagine that even before that you probably already had individuals, blacks and black families, groups of blacks that probably had started migrating to the north, but not in mass numbers, but just maybe just a small number of people may have started migrating. For many reasons why blacks didn't migrate right after the end of slavery was because it just wasn't thought of, or people just could imagine venturing further out in other parts of the country. At the same time, not having the money and the means of transportation to get from place to place, and just I guess a lot of people had kinship ties and traditions in the Deep South. In some cases, maybe perhaps even despite the violence and oppression of Jim Crow. Interestingly enough, in the documentary Henry Jr. Gates, the documentary doesn't mention is that there was a kind of a precursor migration that occurred between 1879 and 1880, called the Great Kansas Exodus, that was led by a former slave who was an abolitionist who escaped from North, Benjamin Pat Singleton. And I had mentioned this in the previous video that he funded a group of he had funded a attempt to guarantee blacks freedom elsewhere in Kansas, where he believed that business and job opportunities were better, as well as freedom from the South, freedom and less oppression compared to the Deep South. Many of these people who were part of Texas, the original Kansas migrations, were people from Mississippi, Louisiana, I think Tennessee, that chose to take part in I should say to endure the I guess to take a chance, and took a chance in migrating to Kansas despite the severe weathers and weather in the long journey. They ventured to Kansas, and some chose to migrate chose to migrate to Kansas, despite even some cases of prejudiced whites in the north, prejudiced whites in the north trying to dismiss them, as well as in places such as my hometown St. Louis, thought that they were better off in the South than in the North, and they didn't belong in their town. Though despite these early migrations, despite this for the most part many blacks remained in the South. So North until the 20th remained in the South. Most of the post years of Reconstruction, it wasn't until the 19-teens, for several different factors, that blacks started migrating north into the urban cities. Beginning with the outbreak of World War I, as many whites left their original jobs, and some went to serve in the army, to serve the country in the army, leaving a lot of jobs open, and many blacks heard that there was many job opportunities in these cities where that the whites had left their jobs, and they had a lot of vacancies open for job opportunities for blacks, Americans. Some took part in this, took advantage of that. Other reasons for the migration was because of boll weevil infestation that occurred, which I had no knowledge of this. And this was my first time I heard that the cause of migration, Great Migration, was because of its infestation of the crops, a boll weevil infestation that drove many blacks. That had effect on the economy in the South with sharecropping and farming. So this drove many blacks elsewhere to the north to find better opportunities. And many opportunities and opportunities in the north. Other main reasons was mainly because there was a resurgence in violence during the mid-19-teens, mainly due to the resurgence of the Second Ku Klux Klan after D.W. Griffin's Birth of a Nation, where lynching began to increase in violence, particularly in lynchings occurred throughout the South at this time, further driving many blacks to find escape, to find refuge elsewhere in the north, even though conditions in some cases in the north were just as bad in the just as bad in the north than it was in the south, with racial violence, and many of these people in the first wave of the migration would travel to many cities on the East Coast and Midwest, most notably New York City's Harlem, which this would start the new era of the New Negro, or the Harlem Renaissance. And you had other places such as Philadelphia, probably Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Chicago. Even St. Louis, my hometown, was a recipient of the Great Migration. And many of these people traveled by the thousands to these many urban cities. And you have to remember, this was a time before many would travel by means of transportation was mostly limited. Even though this period was in the year where air travel was at its infancy, and there was no interstate, so more likely people would have rode by train in some cases, or even by horse and buggy, or by foot in some cases. Not really in cars, though. There is this picture that usually comes to mind, an iconic picture of the Great Migration, of a family that packed up their belongings and looked like it was heading. They were from Florida and they were heading, I guess, somewhere in the north. They doesn't really have much detail about this family, but this is usually an iconic picture that comes to mind of the Great Migration. This one of the iconic pictures of the Great Migration period. And this is another iconic picture as well. This family right here. This was a black family that was from Chicago, and they were actually escaping according to the documentary I was just watching on Henry Jr. Gates, they were actually escaping from the racism in the deep South, and they were met with violence as parts of the family members were killed by murderous white landowners. And I did not know about this, and I actually used that picture in a PowerPoint slide I did when I was in elementary school, and I had no knowledge of that. But anyway, many blacks continued to migrate in mass numbers between the 1910s and 20s, and as I said before, many of these black Americans were escaping Jim Crow and poverty in the poverty in the South, but learning in some cases that racism was just as worse in the North. And I hear this a lot, and I'm starting to realize this in a lot of documentaries I watched, that the North was just as prejudiced. Whites, a lot of the whites, northern whites were just as prejudiced as the whites in the South. They didn't care too much about the rights of black Americans, though the style of racism, I would say, was different, though. As the South, everything was more blatant, more up in your face racism, and racial codes, black codes, Jim Crow laws were more rigid, while Jim Crow laws in the North were more based on customs and standards, ordinances, and they had like covenant laws where blacks couldn't exactly live. They were able to go into white establishments, but yet weren't able to live in white communities, white suburban communities or white urban neighborhoods. They had to kind of stay within other black neighborhoods. And many of these black Americans black Americans end up going to already established black communities that were probably other blacks that left the North at other earlier times, or many were blacks already living in the North who were probably free blacks prior to the Civil War, or people that escaped out of blacks that escaped out of slavery that are already existing in the North. And these communities were, I guess, for the most part, sanctuary for black communities, and in some cases, neighborhoods would thrive. But yet, as I said, the North was full of explosive racial tension as there was a series of race riots that occurred, most notably during the late post-World War I years, known as the Red Summer Riots. You had race riots in places such as Chicago, Washington D.C., Arkansas, Omaha, Nebraska, and most notably the Tulsa Massacre and Roswell massacres. Though Roswell was in the South, but Tulsa was the urban setting, and was sometimes known as Black Wall Street because it was a very thriving community. But as I said before, I hear more about the North being more prejudiced than the South. Particularly California, I hear it's more segregated, more racist because there's so much different racial and ethnic groups that clash. It's not just whites discriminating against minorities, but reverse discrimination of both blacks, reverse discrimination among blacks against whites, and Asians against blacks, and vice versa. It kind of goes back and forth. I hear the same about Boston was very segregated, and segregated among all the different racial and ethnic groups, and they were very segregated among the school systems. And I was just finding out that they had their own tents busing, just reminiscent of the Little Rock 9 incident in Arkansas. They had their own little tensions that rose within the white community of blacks being integrated in the white Boston school district, and this was post civil rights era and in the north mid 70s, and you 70s. I also hear the same from my hometown St. Louis, that is very segregated as well as Chicago. Though the first wave of the migration would continue all the way up to the 1930s with the Great Depression, that kind of dwindled black migration to the north, from the south to the north. The second wave of the Great Migration would occur into the next Second World War II. We'll see another resurgence again of World War II era, and the post-World War II will see a resurgence in blacks migrating to the north as well, this time out west to California. In the ways I would probably consider my own grandparents, and my own grandparents are recipients of this second Great Migration. I guess the generation of the second Great Migration. They both came to St. Louis both in the 50s. Though a lot of people place the timeline of the second Great Migration from 1940 all the way up to 1970, just as the Civil Rights Movement was mostly ending, and conditions in the South were somewhat changing, not completely, but somewhat. And again, this would forever change the landscape of the North. These waves of these migrations. Some start the further achieve better job opportunities, as well as trying to achieve civil rights movement for the nation as a whole. But as the began to change. There was some were reverse migration back from the north to the south, as some started to reclaim the south as their own again, as Black Americans started to reclaim the cultural heritage of the South. And today you still have, even to this day, you still have more blacks that tend to reside in the South than the South. Though this day and age, really demographics of blacks can be found everywhere across the country, really, in some cases. Again, with the Great Migration, it has a cultural impact on our society and culture, as well as music, entertainment, food, culinary traditions, cultures, and also has impacted the politics of our country. So without the Great Migration, there probably wouldn't have been a diverse I guess the word I'm looking for is like a melting pot of African American culture of the United States. And I think that's very significant to our history. Found this a very interesting subject. Feel free to comment on this subject. This is another video by Chase Pound. Stay tuned for our next video.